as you know, this is Women's History Month. I'm going to be focusing on Alaska women in history. And the person I wish to speak on today, Mr. President, was the first woman to preside as president of this body. And that was Jan Faiks, Mr. President. In fact, she was the first woman to preside over either body in the Alaska legislature. Jan was born in New York. She studied math there at the university, but then got a master's degree in counseling psychology at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. She taught in the Anchorage School District from 1968 to 1978. So as a teacher and school counselor, she worked with the district. She also founded a local gardening company during that time, Mr. President, and then she ran for the Alaska Senate. She served for 2 terms, 1982 to 1990. And in 1987 to 1988, she was chosen as the Alaska Senate's first female president. During her time in the Alaska Senate, she used her math skills, her math degree, as one of the chief legislators creating the Constitutional Budget Reserve, Mr. President. This savings account we depend on frequently to fund our budget. She worked to create that. Former State Representative Giessel Phillips, who in her own right served as the second woman Speaker of the State House, said that Jan was elected by her district to come to Juneau and manage the state's budget, making sure that particularly the legislature was operating within its means. But she was also credited while here, Mr. President, for adding a level of decorum to this body. Things were a little wild in the legislature back in those days, and she instituted a dress code, Mr. President, so good on her. Giessel Phillips said she really tried to make being a legislator in this body a profession and very professional. In 1990, she moved to Washington, D.C. with her second husband, Lloyd Jones, who was also a former Alaska state senator. Very interesting. She was known as for her love of llamas. And Mr. President, she had a very large llama farm on the Anchorage hillside, and then later in Virginia when she and her husband moved there. She was known as a hardcore Republican, Mr. President. She was so partisan that when her husband found raccoons in the barn in Virginia, she made him take them to Maryland, where all the Democrats were, she said. After her legislative career ended, she became an attorney and earned a degree at Georgetown University. In 2001, she went to work for the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America Trade Association. We know that as PhRMA, Mr. President, where she became the Vice President for Government Affairs. Jan and her husband, Lloyd, also worked for Representative Don Young for several years before they retired and moved to Florida. Jan passed away at age 71 in her home in Florida when she was diagnosed with cancer. Mr. President, Senator Jan Faiks was a true woman in the leadership history of the state of Alaska. Thank you, Mr. President.